Hello.
Hello, Paul. Hello.
You managed to call me. Oh, excellent. We are now live. Our first ever stereo chat.
Exactly. I was just listening to people talking about what fancy cars they're buying to the sum of hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't think we're going to be having the same conversation.
I don't think so, although I did actually buy a car last week, a VW Polo, secondhand no less.
You're
Um,
probably going to be a guest on this other show then next week, aren't you?
who knows? I mean, it didn't cost me $100,000. I'll tell you that.
Well, exciting times. Nice to treat yourself during lockdown, I guess. I've got a new car coming next month, so if that's what keeps us going, so be it.
I mean, you say it's a treat, but actually, my previous car was a Nissan Micra, an 11-year-old Nissan Micra, which had no digital radio, no air conditioning, nothing basically. So I figured like I was worth maybe a little bit more than that. So I got this VW Polo, which is, to be fair, a lovely car. And because I'm extremely vain, I actually went on to, the DVLA personalized registrations website. Have you been on there?
I haven't, but I kind of see where this is going.
Yes. So I got myself a personalized plate which has the number 747 in it. Um,
Damn,
so
that's one
if
less for me to get.
if you're very canny and you want a really cheap personalized plate, you can actually buy regular Northern Ireland registrations for your English vehicle, and they always have like a Z in, for example. So if you get like BGZ 747, it will mean nothing to anyone but you, but it's still a 747 on the license plate. So yeah.
Oh, well, now you've told me this, I now know where I'm going to be spending my money because I've kind of kitted out my house. I've been doing renovation. I've got a few kind of aviation paintings and stuff like that. But I think if I've got something to drive around in permanently, this could be a result.
Yeah, like it's only like a few £100 to get one of these really cheap um, registrations. If you get the Northern Ireland series one, they're really cheap because they've always got a Z in, and that's never in anyone's name. So they're always real cheap. But yeah, you can get one with 747 or 787 or 777, whatever. So yeah, it's
That,
it's pretty good.
that sounds like how I was maintaining my Twitter following for a while. It was 737, then I upgraded to 747, where I was very
Yeah.
disciplined, and then went on a spree to 767, and I'm nearly at a Dreamliner as of today.
Oh well, soon you'll have enough for a TriStar 1011.
There you go.
Yeah. So I'm just going to alert people on Instagram and Twitter that we are actually live as the room kind of fills up with people. It's great to see so many people now kind of logging in and listening to the chat. This is really going to be a very loosely, almost no agenda chat, really. This is my first time on stereo. No doubt for most of you listening, it's your first time as well. I think, Elliot, it's also your first time as
Mhm.
well.
Yep.
So we're just going to see how it goes. We're going to see if it's a format that works. But definitely it's something to do in lockdown. And while I send these tweets, Elliot, maybe you can sort of introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself while I go in the background and just update my Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, for those that don't know me, I know quite a few on Twitter that I correspond with have said they're going to join today. So hello to all of you. But yes, I go by Avios Adventure on Twitter and a bit on Instagram. Basically, I'm someone that originally from the UK but grew up in South Africa for 12 years. I lived in Turkey for a year. I lived in Cambodia, back here now, but yeah, anything travel related, absolutely love it. It's been a painful last 12 months not being able to do much of that. But then also a self-proclaimed av geek as well. Talking about the 747 just then, that is the ultimate ride in the sky for me. It was sad last year to see that go. But yeah, that's basically sort of who I am, certainly online. And yeah, as those that follow me, terrible jokes and just a bit of nonsense and fun on Twitter. And had a chance to obviously, I met with Paul last year for a beer when we could, when we were out of the lockdown. and we did a quiz during lockdown just before Christmas, I think it was. So that was a bit of fun.
That's
But
right. It was about November or something, wasn't it? I think
it
November,
was just
December
starting to
time.
get dark really early. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So kind of related to your username. In fact, I've got a question that's come in off Instagram, and it is from Matt Nav Travel, who says your favourite ever Avios redemption either of you have made or want to make. So I'll start with you first, Elliot.
Yeah, so 2019, yeah, 2019, because didn't do much travel last year. I had the companion voucher from my American Express and knew that we wanted to get out to South Africa, visit my friends, but also look at a wedding venue because eventually we'll end up getting married out there.
Hmm.
And my other half is a school teacher, so we get punished like we have children when it comes to booking reward flights and availability and all those lovely things. And managed to book a premium economy return, and we paid something like £400, £450 in taxes each, which was a pretty good result. Um, Closer to the time, had a few more Avios come through, and we upgraded ourselves to business class with British Airways on the 747. So excellent
That's
start
sweet.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I said to my other half, I said, "There's not going to be many of these around for that long." And a few weeks later, we actually went on our last when we then went to New York. Um, and then we got to the end of our trip, and we were on the A380 on the way back, and thankfully a friend who's a cabin crew had a nice word with someone working on board that day, and we got upgraded on the way back. So all in all, probably paid about £850 and managed to get two 11-hour business class tickets, which was a pretty good redemption.
Not bad at all. I mean, the first one that came to mind when I saw this question was a couple of years ago now. I flew Cathay Pacific first class,
Mm-hmm.
and I flew from Hong Kong to New York, but it was flight 888 that goes via Vancouver, or at least went via Vancouver. I actually think that flight's finished now. You can now only fly direct from Hong Kong to New York. It doesn't do that cool little stop in Vancouver. But that was absolutely amazing. And it cost me something like 140,000 Avios and about 20 quid, because Cathay Pacific is one of those airlines that doesn't charge you those ridiculous fuel redemption fees, those fuel surcharge fees when you make a redemption, like British Airways do on their longer haul flights. So it was a really, really good value redemption. And of course, that was
It's
before
never
the
as free as you
pandemic.
think, is it? These reward
It,
flights. You kind of go, "Oh, I got two free
nothing in life is
tickets."
free. Nothing in life is
No.
free. Um, but definitely, I would say that's definitely the best one that I've had. I did actually have booked for last summer. I had BA1. I finally got around to doing that. So I had that booked, but unfortunately, with the pandemic, not only did they cancel the flight, they cancelled the whole route. So that BA1 flight from London City Airport to New York, which was on
No
the
longer
Airbus A,
possible.
that was on the A318, tiny little baby Airbus. No longer possible, unfortunately. But that would have been that would probably have been my favourite. It may well have usurped the Cathay Pacific one had I actually done that. But you know, the pandemic happened, and that was one of hundreds of travel plans that got cancelled last year, unfortunately.
Is your email inbox just full of cancelled flights and voucher codes at the moment then
Yeah,
after the last year?
yeah, completely. So I've got a spreadsheet with all the voucher codes that I've got from various airlines. I'm trying to keep a track of, with limited success. I mean, every few days I get so the flights get cancelled, but the reminders in my calendar never do. So every few days I'll get a little pop up saying, "Oh, it's time to check in for your flight to New York." I wish.
It's bittersweet, isn't it, when it comes up like that? Because I've started seeing on social media, there's a lot of people now saying, "Oh, this time last year," and it was kind of the last trip that people did
Yeah.
before I guess we all got grounded, and I kind of feel like myself about it. It's like it's gutting, that so much has been cancelled and stuff, but there is that kind of, it's going to come back at some point, and how sweet that will feel when we finally get on a plane again and are able to jet off, and that's what's keeping me going.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's very strange because I'm aware that we're going to have listeners that are not from the UK that aren't aware of the, shall we say, unique way the government has dealt with the coronavirus problem here. So, for most of last year, it wasn't really possible for the ordinary person to fly. You could fly if it was part of your work. And for me, as a travel blogger who actually, earns money, pays tax, etc., it's actually my job. So I was legally allowed to travel and make some videos last year. Um, there was no sort of explicit ban on travel. With the latest lockdown, of course, there is an almost complete ban on travel unless it's absolutely necessary. And I've not gone anywhere for months. But that's one of the reasons that I keep all this content in my back pocket. It's so that I always have stuff to keep putting out there and keep attracting viewers with and hopefully keep my viewership up on YouTube. But it's kind of interesting talking about this time last year, because I'm just at the start of releasing a series from the very first week of March last year, and the series basically will follow me going from New York to Helsinki. That video's already come out. Then Helsinki on to Singapore, and that was odd. That was with Finnair, and I remember that flight. You didn't have to wear a mask as a passenger, but the cabin crew decided to, because I think at that time there was some sort of internal rule at Finnair that if you were traveling to or from Singapore or anywhere in the Far East, the cabin crew had to wear a mask. It's really strange. I mean, like we've kind of beaten ourselves up in the UK about COVID, blah blah blah. But it was really interesting to look at some of the footage from last year about some of the other weird decisions that were being taken as well. I mean, everyone knows that Singapore is quite good at doing this kind of thing. But when I got off the plane in Singapore, even though there weren't that many passengers around, all they were doing was making you swear basically on your mum's life that you didn't have COVID on a form, and doing temperature checks. So there was no kind of regimented checks about the spread of COVID. Um,
It's
so
crazy how
yeah,
it's changed now, isn't it? That, all the different rules in different places, there's no uniformity around how one should
def-
enforce these things. And
definitely not. And I was looking at my WhatsApp chats from last year when I was in Singapore, and I was saying to people I know, I was like, oh, they're taking it really seriously here. This is not going to be a problem at all. They're making sure that people don't have a fever when they get off the aircraft. And of course, as we know now, that's a nonsense thing to do. I mean, you actually have to have some proper controls on where and when people can travel. But yeah, I mean, it's strange how much things changed. I suppose one of the things I learned about it is that so many of us were just totally unprepared for it. And it's a difficult thing for people to process, I guess, psychologically, the fact that the old way of doing things just has to go on hiatus for a long time.
yeah, it's we were chatting sort of the other day here, and just kind of saying, is there a sort of point we're going to look back, and we were kind of saying, oh, if we had to explain to our kids one day what it was kind of like, it's kind of like, whoa, what is normal? When will we get to a point when it's like before? Will it be like before? And all these things,
Hmm.
and yeah, flying with a mask was obviously a novel experience for me last August, the one time I got away during the pandemic, and it just seemed so normal then at that point that everyone was wearing a mask, everyone was kind of avoiding each other in the airports, and
Yeah.
that became normal. So I wonder what it's going to be like, or when we get to a point like it was, before the pandemic. But yeah, weird times.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of weird. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to go back to how it was in 2019. I think even if most of the rules are relaxed about where you can and can't travel, and people end up flying without masks, etc., etc., I'm sure we'll get to that point. But I think that there will be. I don't think we're ever going to get back to the volume of travel that happened in 2019. I think people will still travel, people will still want to do it, but they'll probably do it differently, and they may choose to do it better, but perhaps less often. I think it's interesting to see how the airline industry might change. And I've had a few questions on Instagram along those lines. You know, like how are airlines going to recover, and what will happen in the future? I mean, I suppose my sort of wise answer to that is, I mean, who knows? I mean, we didn't even see the coronavirus pandemic coming. How can we possibly know what it's going to be like afterwards? I think we assume it's going to go back to what it was like in 2019. It will go back to something good, but I just think it might look different in the same way that flying in 2019 looks a lot different to what it did in 1999. You know, everyone books their ticket over the internet these days, for example, and that wasn't the case 25 years ago or 30
Well,
years ago.
I've still got the conspiracy theory that going forward, Wizz Air are just going to be the only airline taking us anywhere, and that's the only choice that we've got. Because every week it seemed they were opening the most rogue routes ever. It was kind of like Guyana to Doncaster at one point, I think, was being touted, and weird things like that. But
It's so odd,
we
yeah.
less choice perhaps going forward. But I know most people, what I've seen and heard, we're not taking anything for granted. I think we'll realize how lucky we have been and how easy it has been to travel. That going forward, it's a privilege to be able to travel and go different places. So I hope people kind of take that from it all.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a tough year, but it's been a really strange year. And you know, I'm sitting here almost a year into the pandemic, and still very lucky that I can still do what I do. You know, it's affected me, but not necessarily in as severe a way as it has done for a lot of people who actually work for the airlines.
Sure.
You know, if you're on Twitter, I know there are some people that used to be actual airline pilots who are now, delivering for Amazon and Tesco. I've seen that, and I've seen a lot of people that have been furloughed long term who still have a job but don't know when they're going to get back actually flying again. And that's also, I mean, it's better than sort of being laid off or fired or made redundant. But again, most of the people that I think work in the aviation industry don't just do it because it pays the bills. Of course, the money helps, but people, work in aviation because they like flying or they like planes. And even if they're getting the furlough money, it's still not ideal to be just sitting doing nothing and just hoping that the industry reappears again someday.
Yeah, exactly. I think everyone's got their fingers crossed for that, and what's been positive as well is I know a lot of people are itching to spend that money to help those industries again, and help those people, I guess, get back into jobs that they love doing and want
Mm.
to be doing. So if my Twitter timeline is anything to go by, and it's a massive echo chamber, yeah, people have saved up what they can to just do as many trips when we're allowed to do that.
Yeah,
I got a question for you, Paul. In
yeah.
terms of when travel is allowed, you've obviously presumably got some work trips that you're going to be doing, but are you just kind of gagging to get away, kind of on a break and a holiday as well? Are you going to prioritize that, or back
Yeah,
to
that's,
work
that's,
again?
that's a good question. So, and again, I'll kind of outline this for people that are listening from outside the UK. Touch wood, I'm just going to find something to touch. Touch wood, actually, the vaccination rollout in the UK is going really, really well. The government here have now vaccinated over 15 million people. That is, at least they've given them the first shot, which gives them the vast majority of protection, blah, blah, blah. And things are sort of generally going in a good direction for us. So this year, it seems very likely that in terms of holidays, we're going to be able to do some holidaying in the UK, which is going to be great. I mean, one of the good things actually about the pandemic has been watching people, especially people who travel a lot internationally, being forced to discover their own country.
Hmm.
I mean, that's happened a lot in the US, for example. People have been getting RVs and going to all the national parks, like that was going out of fashion. But here in this country, I don't know. I mean, I think I'll probably do a road trip at some point in the summer. And last year during the pandemic, I went actually for a week in a camper van with my mum. It's the first time that we've ever done that. So it was just me and her, and we'll probably do that again this year as well. So I am totally gagging for a holiday. I mean, although I'm kind of, I've done okay out of the pandemic, it is really boring,
Yeah.
and I'm used to being very, very busy. I'm used to a typical week, if I'm away, would be, 3 airport hotels and 5 flights, and then maybe 1.5 days of solid work, editing and doing stuff to make sure a video is ready for the weekend. With the pandemic, I've had to kind of thin out the content a bit. So there are whole weeks I have now where I don't have any work to do, and I just sort of float around the house,
Yeah,
which has definitely been a really weird. It's been a really weird feeling. When I was, God, I must have been about 21. I was unemployed for, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks or something. I've only ever been actually unemployed once, and I was unemployed for about 6 weeks. And I'm getting the same feeling, the kind of purposelessness of, um, just having nothing to do that day and having to find things for yourself to do. Um, and it's kind of weird. It's kind of almost the same feeling, but with an income thankfully behind me. But it is odd about how that feeling comes back regardless of whether you're on £70 a week job seekers allowance or working full time as a travel blogger. It's a very odd feeling.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm, I've been fortunate. I work from home, but kind of going stir crazy looking at the same four walls. I think a lot of people, have struggled with that and not going maybe more than a few miles away from their house as well. But I think I've seen a lot of comments on your channel and stuff. People have kind of lived through your videos that you've
Yeah.
been rolling out, and I can say I've appreciated having that to watch as well. So thank you for keeping a backlog of
Do you know
videos to put out.
it's almost therapeutic editing them as well because one of I mean the editing process for me is almost like pulling teeth. It's the worst part of the whole thing. You get to do the amazing flight, you get to film what goes on, and then you get off the plane. You're like, oh, I've got loads of awesome footage, and then there's this terrible bit of the process where you've actually got to sit down with like 3 hours of worth of footage or 2 hours worth of footage and turn it into a 15 or 20 minute video. And I don't find that fun, but I have found it very therapeutic, looking over old footage and thinking, oh, I remember this flight, and then looking at my notes and thinking, wow, hasn't everything changed? And it's really good to kind of like revisit that stuff. And one of the things I've been doing during the lockdown, when I've got really bored, is looking at my really old stuff from when I first started out. We're talking like nearly 5, 6 years ago now. That was before I was narrating all the videos, and just trying to sort of relive random flights and seeing what I can remember, of the flight from the footage. And it's been nice to kind of relive the journeys that way, because I actually started the channel as a way of scrapbooking what I was doing. Most people would, take pictures and put them on Instagram or a site like Flickr. And I thought, oh, sod it, I'll just, film stuff on a camera and make little videos out of it. And that's really how
What
the channel grew, out of nothing,
what what
really.
What one thing I've wondered, because I think you put in your bio kind of quit my job, and and then kind of the rest was history. I guess words to that effect you put in there. How far into, I guess, documenting as a scrapbook on YouTube with the videos did you kind of think, oh, I can do something here with this, and kind of build it into what you've done? Was there a penny drop moment or trip that
Yeah,
you kind of had it on?
yeah. I mean, like when I got to 10,000 subscribers, which is, it's nothing compared to where I am now. I'm something like 230,000 subscribers now, which is, really, really healthy number, and it's still going up. Um, I got to 10,000 subscribers, and then I remember also at the same time, I started to struggle to reply to everyone in the comments section. And I had the monetization turned on my YouTube channel. And I was thinking, well, if the channel keeps growing, maybe one day I wouldn't have to go to work and I could sort of almost turn the opportunity cost into producing more content. So
Mhm.
I was limited, not only financially at the start, but also in the fact that I had an actual proper job to go to. So I would only be able to film perhaps on a weekend or a bank holiday or in the 28 days annual leave that I had that year. And I would spend huge amount of my disposable income very irresponsibly on flying places and taking trains and, just kind of enjoying myself really. But then like I realized that actually, a couple of these videos are paying for themselves. Wow, that's amazing. And I just thought maybe I'll just keep like, grafting and grafting and grafting really hard. Eventually I can achieve that critical mass and, hand in my notice at work and then, work 365 days a year on producing content, which has been great until the pandemic. And I've been doing 365 days of doing nothing. Uh,
Yeah.
such is life. Such is life.
And I guess a follow-on question to that is, what do you remember the first trip report you did when you did do it full time?
When I did it full time, that's a good question because I always work with a backlog, and I'm not sure what the first video that I released was when I went full time. But I do remember my first world tour of 2018. Was it 2018? God, I mean 2021. I think, yeah, I think it's 2018. I remember on that world tour I did something like 28 flights in 26 days or something. It was a
Oh,
ridiculously
heck.
mad itinerary. And I remember like thinking, like, maybe halfway through I was thinking, actually, I'm not bad at this. And I really enjoy doing it. I'm also perhaps better at this than I am in my actual real job in real life. Maybe, I can, if this series goes well, I can quit my job. I do remember that being another kind of turning point for me, but I don't remember the first time that I traveled and not having had a job to go back to.
I'd find that strange. I'd be like, oh wow, it's kind of like I've committed to this now. You're kind of in the deep end as well. But
Mm.
I just think fair play. I tried videoing a flight and stuff that I did once, and I just couldn't hold my passport, my boarding ticket, and a camera at the same time. So I wasn't quite sure how exactly you managed to get everything that you do.
It's very difficult. I mean, I used to have um, a GoPro on a little mount that went on one of my backpack straps, so it would automatically film. And now I've got a 360-degree camera where I can just kind of hold that, or even on a selfie stick, jam it in a pocket, and it doesn't matter what it's pointing at because it's a 360-degree camera. That's the real utility of it, is that I can just have it somewhere and, in the edit process, figure out where I want the camera to point. That's a really great piece of kit. That it's what's it called? It's called the Insta 361X, and I don't get anything if you buy that or anything. That's not sponsored, but that's a 360-degree camera that I use, and that is absolutely amazing. It's probably my most labor saving piece of kit that I have.
And just a ton of video to go back and edit, I guess.
There,
Once
there,
that's
there
all
is
pulled
there is
through.
a huge amount. Yes, there's a huge amount of video that captures, but I tend to only turn it on when say I'm boarding or I'm leaving an aircraft, or when like various things are happening in the service, then I'll like try to turn it on, because leaving it running all the time is just, it's ridiculous, and it would fill up the memory card so quick.
Yeah, it's once again, I take my hat off to you guys that that do this. Yeah, it's I'd say a thankless task, but I guess the subscribers speak for themselves
Oh,
who thank you for that.
it's not a thankless task at all. I mean, all I do really is make videos and put them on YouTube, and people seem to really like them. And I don't try to be anything, I guess, that I'm not. I never put myself out there as some sort of aviation expert or whatever. And I'm just grateful that, if people like the videos, because people like the videos for all sorts of reasons. Some people like the actual reviews of the flights and use them as a way of deciding where they're going to go next, or which airline they want to put their money towards. And some people just like traveling vicariously because they either don't have the money, or their life circumstances mean they don't travel as much as they could. For example, if you've got a young family or whatever, you're going to be staying at home most of the time. You're not going to be out doing the things that I do, and traveling all the time. So it's really good that people can experience that vicariously, because when I was like, I don't know, 21, 22, the only flying I could do was on Ryanair, like to Dublin or something. And I had no money. I was I was really sort of hard up when I was in my 20s. And I would have loved to have been able to just watch videos of other people going on flights, even if there were flights that I couldn't afford. And yeah, it's really great that, obviously people still keep subscribing to the channel and still keep watching them. um, and it's great. I mean, I don't know what else I can say. It's just it's great, and I feel very, very lucky that I've managed to do this with my life. at least for now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? And tell you what, that actually, I tell you something that made me feel really old on Instagram. I did a Q&A session on Instagram, and we'll get to some of the questions that you guys have left on Instagram shortly. By the way, you've left some really good ones. But a couple of months ago, I was doing a Q&A session on there, and somebody asked me, when you were at school, did you want to become a YouTuber? YouTube's only what, 12, 13 years old. The only social media I had when I was a teenager was MSN Messenger. Do you remember that?
Yeah, you bump
Yeah.
people on there, didn't you, if they're ignoring you?
Yeah, so in the later ones, you could like sort of buzz people or whatever. But back when it was first a thing, and when I first had it, you couldn't do that. So you had to either talk to people, or you had to keep signing in and out and hope that your crush would message you. Because obviously, if she messaged you first, that was amazing. But if you had to message them first, you felt like the small guy, and
Or or you pretend
the
you disconnected as well. That was
pretend you
always a trick as well.
disconnected. Yeah,
Yeah, oh, I didn't get your message. Sorry, I disconnected there. That was another one.
yeah.
My mum's been on the phone.
Yeah, because I don't think it was like WhatsApp. I don't think there were read receipts, so you couldn't blue tick someone like you can on WhatsApp. But anyway, I mean, like, that made me feel really old. I'm 30. I'm 35 this year, which is, it's really old for someone on YouTube.
It's
I'm not,
34, Paul. We get a count. We get a count last year as just a zero. So you're 34 because we've all just gained an extra year from
well,
the year we just lost. So
last year I think I aged twice as much as I should have, so I'll count that as 36. But yeah, like I remember that question came in from somebody who was very young, and it was a very sweet question, and it did make me laugh. But enough of all of this positive talk about travel, etc., etc. I've got a really great question from Saf Bygrave, who says, "What's your biggest pet peeve when traveling, apart from boarding, not boarding?" So, Elliot, what's your biggest pet peeve, your pet hate when you're traveling?
oh, the thing is, I've got quite a few. But
So have
I
I.
oh God. So can I do one before getting on a plane and one on the plane just
Yeah, of
to
course. Yeah, knock
to
yourself out.
so before getting on a plane, it's got to be, fully grown adults that, presumably dress themselves, they manage to buy a ticket, make some breakfast for themselves, but then they
Yeah,
get to the security line and everything just falls to pieces in terms of they've either never understood that you can't take 5 liters of water on board with you, and they can't figure out how a belt works, and you kind of just stand there looking at these people thinking, how do you pay taxes, how who's employing you, and that's my thought that goes through my head. And I don't know if this is just me, because I used to fly at 5 o'clock in the morning through Heathrow, on many trips, and I think it's just scarred me, seeing those people at that time of the morning go through security. So that's probably my
but before you go on to
biggest
your next
one.
one, I'll just add to that. My pet peeve is not before security or even at security. It's after security, when, especially at airports, when you have to return the tray and people
Oh
don't do
God.
it. And people don't do it. And Heathrow is one of those places where you're expected to return the tray. And I always make a point of, when you can stack the thing, you
Yeah.
can stack those crates up. I bang each one. So I've got like five, and I go bang, 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 and I chunter, and I'm like, bloody state people around here coming through
Yeah.
our airport and not stacking the trays, and then I like
Yeah.
bang them down, and then I eyeball one of the security people and like do a little nod, like, you should get
It,
people to do it before they actually run away. I really hate that. I mean, to be fair, in some airports the security staff do it for you, but I know a lot of people that go through that airport. They're just lazy.
I'm concerned myself with the amount of, because I'm like you, I stack them as well, kind of passively aggressively kind of eyeball people. But I'm concerned I stack that many. I've then been employed by Heathrow because I'm that good and I might miss my flight.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I think security as a whole, there's a lot of trigger points there, and if you've not had your morning coffee yet, oh my gosh, it just gets a bit worse, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I
What
mean,
about
like,
on a plane for you, Paul? Are
quite
you?
quite well, quite often I haven't actually had my coffee when I go through security. I'm quite lucky to get into airport lounges, so I'll be a spendthrift and I'll wait until I get into the lounge. That always means I go through security grumpy. Um, so what about on the plane for me? What's my peeve on the plane? Do you know, I'm very lucky in that a lot of the flights that I do, I'm in business class, and one of the benefits of being in business class is that you're far away from other people, quite often in your own little suite, or at least a seat that's kind of segregated from everybody else. But I think the one that really gets me is when people stand up before the seatbelt sign has been turned off, and I love it. I love it when, for example, you know, you're taxiing back to the gate after you've landed, and you hear one of the cabin crew come onto the public address and say, "You are requested to remain seated until we've pulled up at the gate and the seatbelt signs off." And you always turn around and look, who is it? Who is it? And
Yeah.
there's always someone doing it.
I had it. I flew Turkish into Gatwick once, and we hadn't turned off the runway yet, and there were people starting to get up and get their bags off, and I just thought that is either someone really in a rush, or I wasn't quite sure, but the crew themselves were just like, I think they kind of saw it every day,
Mm,
and I just thought, well, you're not going to get off the plane any quicker by, you know, we're still going 70 miles an hour outside, and
yeah.
yeah, he's trying to get his bag out of the yeah, yeah. But I guess if you're flying business class a lot, like you said, you're kind of tucked away from a lot of the general annoyances that one could see just for having more people around you. There's bound to be more, or someone doing something annoying. Um, as well. But surely you see, which is my pet peeve, barefoot people on a plane. I think that's punishable by death. People taking off their socks and shoes on a plane.
I'll confess to having done that before when I was very green. I I did it almost on purpose. So I was traveling first class with British Airways, and it's actually in one of my very early videos. I forget which one it is. It's one of the British Airways first class ones, but I do have my bare feet out, and I did it sort of knowing that it would annoy people in the video.
You're
I
on
think I had
passenger
them.
shaming.
I passenger shamed myself. Yeah. I mean, I actually don't have a thing about bare feet. I mean, I think your feet are probably cleaner than your hands. Um, but one of the things that does get me is when people have their actual feet, sorry, their trainers on the actual seat itself. If they've like curled up and tried to go to sleep, that's worse because God knows what's on the bottom of your actual shoe. I'd much rather it was a bare foot than a shoe, if I'm quite honest. So at least the bare foot's come out of a shoe and it hasn't trodden God knows what.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and yeah, I've just seen some horrific things in economy and long haul flights, and kind of just then had that realization: I'm in a metal tube for the next 11 hours. Oh God, this could get bad. When you see someone
Yeah,
straight
yeah,
off,
yeah.
uh, I need to
So
spend more time at the front.
I do, but funny you should mention about the 747 right at the start of this chat. The last time I flew the British Airways 747 was in, I think, February last year. I flew back from Los Angeles to London, and I flew in economy. So this was it was what I call to myself a positioning flight. I don't film it. It's just like a way of getting between the two places. It will surprise a lot of people who watch my YouTube channel that I actually do fly economy quite a lot, but I tend not to film it because it's really difficult to film in such a tiny space. And quite often I'm flying economy to actually, save money or just because I know that I'm going to be sort of like out cold for 6 hours on the flight and I don't want to be filming anything. So anyway, I'm flying British Airways economy class on the 747, and this aircraft is like 99% full, and I'm sitting towards the back, and there's this really sweet old lady who is in not the seat next to me, but the aisle seat. I'm by the window, and we keep looking at each other as more and more people file past, and the middle seat is free. There's no one sat there. And I remember looking at her and saying, let's just listen for the boarding complete and see if we end up with a free seat here. And I swear to God, it was the only free seat on the entire plane, and it was next to me. And the cabin crew came over and said, boarding complete. And we did like a little fist bump. She was a really sweet old lady from from Los Angeles. And we're like, yes. Get in there. A
There's
free
no
seat.
sweeter sound than boarding
Yes,
complete, is there, when there's an
yes,
empty seat?
exactly. And the first thing you do, of course, is you start decanting all of your stuff from the seat pocket into the middle seat
Yeah.
pocket and into the middle seat. And finally, you've got loads more room. That is an amazing feeling.
And I guess I've just seen this come through from Twitter from Gaz, and it's I guess on a very similar theme here, because it's probably around etiquette and around how one should behave on a plane. We've been sent seat recliners, discuss,
Yeah.
because I've got my opinion on this, but I think everyone's got a different set of criteria. If you're on an economy flight, Paul, what are you doing? When are you putting your seat back for a kip? It's an overnight long haul flight. What are you doing?
If it's an overnight long haul flight, I think there are different levels of etiquette for seat reclining. Like, for example, if I'm on short haul in Europe and I'm only flying for 2 hours, I personally don't recline at all. If it's like long haul and it's the kind of flight where you would be expected to get some sleep, I I think, and this is going to be controversial to some people, I think you are entitled to recline straight after takeoff. If that interferes with someone during the meal service, tough. I know that it's a pain in the backside to have to eat while you've got, the seat kind of like mashing half of your dinner into your lap. But I generally think that, having been there myself and been absolutely knackered on flights, and I've taken economy flights where I am knackered, I think that if the seat reclines and you're knackered and you're going to go to sleep, knock yourself out. I suspect you may have a different opinion on that.
I'm of the check with the person behind you and get their view. The reason I say that is I've sat behind someone who, it wasn't before the meal surface. It was midway through a curry.
Oh well,
The seat.
that's clearly not good. Yeah, I mean, if you recline while someone's obviously doing something like having the meal service, that's not fair play. So I mean, like if you've waited so long to recline that people are now starting to be served their dinner, you can't recline while the stuff is being served to people or while they're eating. That's not fair play.
So I think perhaps that bad experience has kind of skewed my view of it. But I'm of the same opinion of you. If I've paid for a seat and I'm tired, I'm going to use the seat kind of how it was intended to be used.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tough one.
We've got another question that I want to get through. It is from, oh, has it disappeared? Maybe I've hidden it on my Instagram. I'm very kind of like IT illiterate for someone who actually makes money doing this kind of thing. Here we are. This question has been sent in from Pols_Cantle, and she says, I assume it's a lady, and she says, "How do you cope with severe turbulence? It's one of the reasons I get anxious about flying," which is a question I get asked a lot. I'm wondering what you think about it.
It's changed over time. I think when I wasn't flying as regularly, and the flying that I was doing was Johannesburg to London, and you get over the equator, and it does get bumpy, and it would either wake me up, or I was kind of watching a film or whatever, and I don't know, things started going through my head, and I was like, this isn't great. And then I don't know, the more I kind of flew, and the more I was kind of like, yeah, planes are just incredible. I was
Mm.
like, we're fine. This happens all the time, and now I really don't mind it. Yeah, I don't know how I deal with it. Just knowing that the pilots in control are just very good at their jobs and wouldn't
Yeah.
put a plane in a bad position. I think that's how I kind of rationalize it in my head, and then just strap in a bit tighter if it is a bit
Mm.
jumpy.
So I'll just sort of interrupt this bit with I've had several Instagram messages and tweets saying, "Why are you doing this while Liverpool are playing?" Because a lot of people know that I'm a Liverpool fan, and I'm doing this while Liverpool are playing, but I'm cheating in that I'm looking at the live text, and I'm pleased to let people know if they support Liverpool and are listening to me. I'm sure nobody is daft enough to be listening to me while their team's playing, but Liverpool have scored an away goal in Leipzig, which is great. Well, it's not in Leipzig, is it? it's somewhere else. But anyway, Liverpool have scored. Everything's great. I'm in a much better mood now, having seen that.
In one
And
eye on the football.
almost on the theme of Liverpool's season this year, I'll talk about turbulence. So I think one of the things that
That's a
really gets
segue.
people, it is a segue. Uh, so, so one of the things that I think really gets people out of turbulence is the lack of control. In that, not only are they not in control of the aircraft, they can't see the people in control of the aircraft. And
Mm.
I always try to rationalize it with people by saying it's just like going over rumble strips or speed bumps in a car, except in a plane, they're literally invisible. You can't see when they're coming, so you can't prepare for them. If I'm heading towards a speed bump, at let's just imagine I have to drive at 50 miles an hour everywhere and I have to go over a speed bump. I know because I can see the speed bump coming that it's going to jolt and it's going to be very unpleasant and that my head might hit the ceiling. But I also know that the car isn't going to explode or kill me by going over the speed bump fast. It's just going to be uncomfortable because cars are built to take that kind of thing. And aircraft are the same. And you know, heading through severe turbulence and going over a million speed bumps, some of which are terrible, it feels worse than it is because you can't see what's causing all of that sort of upset. And I mean, I have quite a good tolerance for turbulence, but I did have quite a bad experience flying into Bali when I was at the end of my little sort of tour of Australia. That was really bad. I'd had this absolutely perfect flight over, and then when we got to Bali, there was this horrific lightning storm, and we're talking like lightning flashes every 2 or 3 seconds out the window, and this turbulence was so bad it made me. And bear in mind, I fly in a normal year 100 times a year, so I was like fully braced, like both hands braced against the seat and both feet wedged against the seat in front because the turbulence was that bad. It was honestly the worst that I've ever encountered. It was rocking and pitching and diving and all sorts. It
A
was
few
really
whoops
unpleasant.
from people, few screams. It's a few screams from people, I guess. Have you had a go around? Because I've never had one of those, and I feel weirdly jealous that I haven't. But
I
you see
I
videos of it.
I have not had a go around in a commercial aircraft. So I've had a go around in a C-130 Hercules. So I'll
Wow.
give you. So I was in the Air Cadets when I was a teenager, and for people who don't know what the Air Cadets is, it's a uniformed youth organisation that it runs along the lines of the RAF, but it's not like being in the military. It is being a cadet. You wear a very similar uniform when you're subjected to similar discipline, but you're not in the RAF and you're not in the armed forces. But you do get to do an awful lot of cool things, and I was very lucky to be chosen at the very end of my sort of cadet career, I suppose you will call it. When I was 18, I went on the International Air Cadet Exchange, and I was the guest of what might be called the equivalent of the air cadets in the US, the Civil Air Patrol, and we did some flying with the US Army and the US Air Force. And I managed to get in. This is a place called Biloxi, Mississippi. So we were flying out of there, and the squadron they have down there is the Hurricane Hunters. So it's basically a C-130 Hercules with one of those big long nose probes that goes and flies actually into storms. So we were flying on this, and we actually went right out into the Gulf of Mexico, and this was when Hurricane Katrina was just forming.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
Yes, off the coast of the US. So we actually got to see Katrina from a C-130 Hercules before it was a full-blown hurricane. And these aircraft are amazing. They go literally into the eye of a hurricane. They fly around in a big spiral and collect atmospheric data and all the rest of it. So we did something similar to that, but with a baby hurricane. So it probably wasn't quite as photogenic as I'm making out. But anyway, we had to go around when we came back into land because we had a problem with the landing gear. And so there was like 10 of us cadets that were sitting in the belly of this C-130. And you're not facing forwards or backwards. You're kind of facing each other across the aisle. So the seats are oriented sideways along the wall. And we came back in for a second attempt, and the nose gear collapsed,
Oh my
um,
God.
which which was surprisingly not scary because, like, what's happened. You know the nose gear has failed, but the sound is like something out of hell. It's awful. Imagine like metal scraping at 100 miles an hour on tarmac. Just the most awful sound.
It's not what you probably thought you're signing up for with the air cadets when that sort of thing happens, flying into a hurricane and then having your nose gear collapse as you land.
Yeah, I mean, give me a good story though. I mean,
Oh yeah, that's better
yeah,
than anything that I've got. Yeah, I felt mildly nauseous once in a storm, but that doesn't really count, does it?
yeah. I mean, so we did a go around in there, and I also once had an emergency landing in a glider because when we were, so this was a winch launch, which I'm not sure if you've done, but it's the most surreal way to launch a glider. So of course,
I
glider
did one a
has,
few years ago. It surprised me how quick it was and the angle that you
yes.
go up at. It's an incredible experience doing that.
Yeah, it's like a 45-degree angle you go up at. And it's really weird because you sit in perfect silence at the end of the field and you've got this like really snaked out rope in front of you that obviously is being withdrawn into a winch. And you just sit there and you gradually hear like a and then bang, you go forward at like, I don't know, 40 knots or whatever, and you go straight into the air. And it's like being suddenly like punched into the air by this winch. But the cable for this particular flight broke at something like 200 feet, so we had to like
Oh,
do a quick return and circuit back. And at the time, I didn't realize that it was an emergency at all because the pilot simply took control and landed. And then when we landed, he said that was the cable breaking. That was that horrible sound after about 10 seconds. And I was like, oh,
jeez, you must have just thought there was like no what you call it the heat bringing you up. You thought, oh, it's probably not a good day for gliding up until he told you that the winch broke.
well, no, I didn't realize that he was taking us into land at all because there wasn't a radio in
Ah,
this thing. We kind of like leveled off, then did a right turn, then another right turn, um, and then he landed. And I was thinking, oh, that was quick. I was expecting a bit more.
yeah,
Oh,
it's like, oh, I can see why we invented the engine now.
yeah. Actually, a lot of the flying that's done with gliders in the air cadets is done with motor gliders, which is cheating. They use, or at least they used to use, a Grob Vigilant, which is basically like a tail dragger light aircraft, but with enormous wings. Um, so you're supposed to turn the engine off when you get up to, somewhere where you can glide properly. But because it's got an engine in it, it doesn't glide as well as something without
Mhm.
any engine in it at all. So yeah, it's just used for teaching that aircraft.
I need to get back up in one actually. I just thought it's a cool experience and whatever way to I guess learn as well. Um, yeah, that's on my list of post COVID things to do. I think is get back up in a glider or a real plane.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to take me up, I'm up for that.
So we've got another question from Instagram. PG Rue said he asks a question which the answer to which is yes. He says, "Would you have flown Concorde for one of your videos if you could?" Absolutely. I remember, um, I remember seeing Concorde take off. I was actually, before I was in the Air Cadets, I was a scout, and I think I was about 12, and we went to, I can't remember what it's called, but there's like a visitor centre at Heathrow, which is on Bath Road, with big glass
Mhm.
windows. And I remember we like stood out in the car park and watched Concorde take off, and it was the most incredible thing because you're there all day and you see all the regular aircraft take off, and much as we all have aircraft, they get a bit samey after a while, don't they? But Concorde is something else. I mean, it went like an absolute banshee, um, and you could tell when it was about to take off. And everyone would say, "Oh, we can see it taxiing out now." And we ran out into the car park and we watched this thing go past and up into the air with the reheat on the afterburner. So you got the orange,
The visual
um,
effect of it as well. Just
yes,
yeah.
basically the fire coming out of the uh, uh, out the back of the engines. And I've seen Concorde take off twice in my life. And the second time I saw it, it was at dusk. So it was dark, and you could
Wow.
see there was like, a 4 or 5 meter streak of flame coming out of each of the engines, and it's just the most incredible thing. And yes, I would definitely have flown it. I would have spent whatever it would have taken to get a flight on Concorde. Um,
Wasn't it something like towards the end, and I guess part of the reason it became uneconomical was that it was only about 30 or 40% of passengers were actually full paid passengers, and the rest of them were kind of reward flights and things like that. And that's another reason why it just wasn't sustainable. I don't know if that's just a rumor, but I think a lot of people ended up on there not paying the full £10,000 or whatever
yeah,
it costs
I,
to go on there.
I mean, Concorde, I don't think ever made a profit in and of itself. It wasn't supposed to.
Mm.
But I remember when British Airways did have Concorde, it had what I would call like a halo effect. Like British Airways were the airline that had Concorde. They have Concorde in the fleet. Look how posh British Airways are. That's amazing. And you would see all the pop stars. Elton John could go to New York and back in a day, and you think, oh my God. And you can arrive in New York before you even left in London.
Yeah.
So you could leave London at midday, and you would arrive in New York at like 9:30 or 10 a.m. And it was the most incredible piece of machinery, and it was right out of the Thunderbirds era of design. Like if you ever watched Thunderbirds and look at all of the fanciful
Oh yeah.
aircraft they have, it's very much of the time when supersonic transport was just becoming a thing in the 60s, and it it was just the most incredible aircraft. And people who haven't seen it in the flesh have missed out. And I know I sound a bit like an old fart for saying that for a lot of people that have never seen Concorde. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you just have to see to understand why it was a special aircraft. I never once flew on it. And it was, way before I could have ever have dreamed of affording such a ticket. But just to actually
And
see it take off was
and
unbelievable.
and no matter how many times that the hundreds and hundreds of times that I've flown in and out of Heathrow, every time I see it out the window when I'm taxiing, just parked up at the end of the east side of the airport, you can't help but just take your phone out your pocket and get another picture of it as well.
Mm.
It's awesome that it's just kept over there, and I hope it's there for a long time to come.
Absolutely. I've had another question come in on Twitter from Robert Ferrugia, who asks a great question. He actually prefaces his question by saying, "Great podcast." Now, if you're ever going to ask a question and get it included in someone's show, just give them a compliment at the start, and that'll ensure that you get included. But Robert says, "Great podcast." He says, "If you could go to a single destination with somebody else paying, that sounds good. Where would you go?" And I know exactly where I would go. I would go to Japan. It's not even a difficult question, that one. I've never been to Japan. And it's one of these places that I would love to spend 3 or 4 weeks traveling around, doing it properly, not getting on a million flights all the time, taking a few bullet trains, seeing the cherry blossoms, going to some of the remote islands. Japan is one place which I refuse to visit until I can do it properly.
Do it justice. Yeah,
Exactly,
I'm
exactly.
surprised that you've not been out there. I thought there'd have been a JAL review or something
So
that you
I,
might have
I,
been.
I, I have touched Japanese soil only once, and that's actually on this series I was talking about earlier. I flew from Singapore to Los Angeles on the Singapore Airlines flight that stops off in Tokyo Narita Airport. So I was in Narita
Mhm.
Airport for 1 hour, but that doesn't count as being in Japan.
It's a full stamp in my book. That you visited it, well, technically been to a country. That's the bar that I'm going to set for people.
Yeah.
The layover in Qatar that people do, I don't think they've actually been to Qatar. That might ruin a few people, burst a few bubbles there. But
I
um,
can actually put my hand up and say I've been to Qatar. I did when I flew to Australia. I flew Helsinki, Doha, or Doha. I think it's Doha. Helsinki, Doha, then to Sydney, and then on to Canberra. I actually spent 2 days in Doha, and I hated it. It was rubbish. There's nothing to do there, honestly.
it's just
Um,
artificial, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, like I'm one of these people that likes. It's a bit cliche, but I like to see the real place, for example. And in a lot of the Arab states, they are very new, and there is not an awful lot of. Um, it's not fair to say there's no culture, because every place has some culture,
Hmm.
but there's a lack of authenticity with some of those places. They will get the authenticity eventually once they establish themselves. But I mean, places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Doha and so on, they don't really turn me on. And I did visit Doha to try and do it justice, but it really is just a long series of extremely well air conditioned shopping malls and tower blocks. And I guess it's like being in Milton Keynes, except it's 45 degrees outside.
As many roundabouts in Doha as
I,
Milton
you know,
Keynes,
I'm
or they're
not
not
sure they
quite there
had
yet?
roundabouts there. It's one of those places where everywhere is an intersection, like in America, because they can't do
Oh,
roundabouts either.
just big roads and big cars going everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we have time for maybe one more question. So I'm just going to scroll through my Instagram, and then we'll wrap things up. Um, let's get a good one. Let's get a good one. Um, someone. Oh, here we go. So it's actually the first question that someone dropped on my Instagram today relating to this. It's from Nico.planet. Thanks for your question. He says, which airline have you flown before that you miss because it no longer exists? So we're talking about airlines that have gone out of business that we really miss. What's yours?
Um, I'd have to say, and I know I only flew it on one trip from Gatwick to Dubrovnik, and I think it was just a few months before it went bust. But I really like Monarch, and I
Uh,
know that there's a lot of
mm,
love for Monarch, and everything about it. I just thought, well, this is great. So I was very sad to see them go, and there's obviously a lot of nostalgia with them.
mhm.
But yeah, I'd have to say Monarch.
Do you know it's a good choice, and I'm going to be boring and also pick Monarch, mostly because that was the first airline that I can recall flying. When I was about two and a half, I flew with Britannia. I'm not sure if you remember Britannia Airways.
Hmm.
I flew Britannia from Luton to Palma de Mallorca to see an aunt of mine, but I have almost no memory of that flight whatsoever, so it doesn't count in my mind. The first holiday that my family ever took abroad was to the Costa del Sol in Spain, and I think I was about 12. And for someone who liked planes but had never been on one and had never been abroad, you can imagine the level of excitement in a 12-year-old. It was our first proper holiday overseas. Oh, actually, no, I lie. I I went with. Do you remember Air Tours? Do you remember Air Tours International?
I don't. I don't know if it's because I lived abroad or when they're about. I don't know.
Yeah, I lie actually. The first holiday that we took abroad was actually we went on this really cheap cruise that my nana paid for to the Canary Islands, and we flew with Air Tours. And this is so weird. I used to think this was like totally normal back in the day, but this flight took off from Birmingham Airport, and it flew to East Midlands, yeah, and then it flew to Tenerife.
Oh, so it's
Um,
like it was like a bus stop. It was collecting
yeah,
along the
it
way.
picked up more people in East Midlands. So we got on in Birmingham, and then we did like the little hop to East Midlands, picked up some more punters, and um, then went to Tenerife. And what's my only sort of memory of that flight is when we were just in the descent. We just started our descent down into Tenerife. We were allowed to go onto the flight deck, and I remember seeing Mount Teide of Tenerife poking up above the clouds, and that was the only thing that you could see. And I just the pilot told me, "Oh, that's Mount Teide or whatever," and pointed it out. I didn't believe him. Like I didn't believe that a mountain could go above the clouds. But getting back on topic, my fondest memories are with Monarch. I mean, we went on this holiday to the Costa del Sol, um, and that was a proper holiday that my parents had actually sort of paid for. We had a friend, I think, that had timeshare. Do you remember timeshares? She had a timeshare apartment down there in this resort, and we thought we were dead posh going to the Costa del Sol. We got on an Airbus A300 of Monarch, so that was, I think it was a 232 configuration, and it felt like, it was a big plane, and we were going somewhere really important. Of course, only 2 hours down to Malaga, I think we flew into. But I really do miss Monarch, and I didn't get to fly them again before they folded. Unfortunately, they started doing this bizarre route from Stockholm Arlanda down to, I think, Luton or Birmingham. It was somewhere in the south of England anyway, and I'd booked to go on it. It cost like something like 20 quid or something. And then the airline went bust, and I never got to fly. And I always wanted to fly that route because I was thinking, oh, I must fly Monarch again. And then they went bust. And it was like out of the blue. And I remember it being like a
Yeah, it
real
happened really quickly as well.
a real
I
shock.
don't remember hearing much about, them struggling or anything. And then all of a sudden, I think that was the first time I've gotten upset about something plane or airline related, was them. And it was from one flight. But I think seeing a lot of the outpouring of kind of love towards them on social media was the first time I was probably involved in social media.
Mm,
And yeah, it was one of those ones that was like, oh, that's a real shame. And I think there's been
yeah.
some other obviously huge ones recently that have gone that we could have picked from.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people miss Flybe, although I can't say it wasn't one of my preferred airlines. I suppose I've got one more question I just thought of myself, which is, which airline that you never flew, but wish you had done? Is there an airline that doesn't exist anymore that you never got to fly, but wish you'd done one flight with them?
Oh God, there's two massively iconic ones. It's Pan Am or TWA. I
Hmm.
think are up there. Just I think the visuals of them. Yeah, I'd have to pick one of the two. I'll go Pan Am.
It's a
I
very
think
good
Pan
choice.
Am.
I was thinking Pan Am when I asked that question, because um, Pan Am definitely has some, amazing visual design and some incredible style. I would have loved to have flown Pan Am, should I say, before they sadly went bust. I I mean, TWA is another big one as well. Those are the ones also that kind of stick out for me. There are so many defunct airlines. It's weird how those two stick out. It must be because their memory sort of lingers on with, lots of enthusiasts remembering them because they were such huge airlines.
Yeah, and I think for me, the 747 Pan Am, it's kind of like that. That's it right there. That's where it all kind of started,
Yeah.
with them. So there's that, and then I don't know if I think you might have been, but the TWA hotel at JFK, I
But
experienced that a few years ago, and the feeling that kind of gave me walking in there and seeing it and what I guess air travel used to be like.
yeah,
As well. That kind of I started reading into TWA a bit more, and yeah, it seemed awesome. And I don't know if that's rose tinted glasses looking, you know, uh, back into what air travel used to be, but yeah, they both just icons, I guess.
definitely. Anyway, I think we will wrap things up here now. I want to say thanks to everyone that's kind of left questions for us on Twitter or Instagram, and try to join. And thanks so much for giving us some little cue cards to move our conversation along. I hope you've enjoyed our little chat. I've got a few more lined up to go in the next week or two, with some other guests that I'll reveal on my Twitter and Instagram shortly. And if you could do me a favor and just share the fact that I'm on Stereo, which is a relatively new live podcasting app. Share this conversation, this little podcast, if you thought it was interesting. But otherwise, thank you so much for turning up. I know that trying to get you guys onto a new platform to listen to me is not easy, and I really appreciate that some of you have been so interested in hearing what we have to say today, that you've signed into the app and got yourself a profile and sent us reactions and little bits of applause and messages and tweets. It's been really great. It's been a really good use of my evening, and thanks so much, Elliot, as well, for coming along and having a chat with me.
No, thank you. I really enjoyed that. That was good, and yeah, looking forward to see who else is going to come on as well. But no, that was really good fun. So thank you.
Awesome. No worries, Elliot. And thanks so much. I'll let you get back. And thanks everyone for watching. Good night.